My name is Caleb Anderson, and you're listening to Jesus the Overcomer podcast. Hey everyone. This week I have Rachel Radtke on. I'm really excited to have her on. She's been a good friend of mine for a few years now, and I think her testimony is really going to touch a lot of people's life. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to go ahead with the starter question, and that's the question I ask all my guests, and it is, who or what has had the most impact on your walk with Christ?
I would say there are a couple different people, but it was in different seasons. The most impactful, like to this date, would be one of my teachers I had in high school. And it was a situation where I wasn't following God anymore, and I was like really going through a hard season of depression and anxiety from a past relationship. And he was my Spanish teacher, and I would come into class and he could just like see the weight I was bearing. And one day he came over to me with his phone, and it was like a picture of a verse, but it was in Spanish. And he was like, I want you to translate this when you get home for extra credit. And at first I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. I don't even do the work already. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do this at home. And I got home later and like something just like pricked my heart, like maybe I should. And I translated it and I was like, wait, this is like a Bible verse. Like that's crazy. And like immediately like touched my heart and cut through like all those layers of hurt and depression and anxiety. And the next day I go back to school, same thing. And this was consecutive for, I would say, like 2 straight weeks. He just constantly was like, Rachel, come here. I have another extra credit assignment for you. And that was one of the reasons my heart like turned back to Christ, and it didn't become hard and didn't stay there. So to this date, that was like the biggest shift, the person who like impacted me back onto the right path with God.
I love that. I love that it was a teacher because in high school I had a teacher who was a big impact um for me as well. But I love that for whoever is listening, if they're a teacher, it's like can encourage them that they can have an impact. I feel like teachers probably go through a time when they feel like I don't think I'm doing this
Right.
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 But just hearing that was your person, that's had the biggest impact. And to this day, I mean, that's really encouraging. Um, so before I get into the other questions, I kind of wanted to um tell everybody how like I know you.
Okay.
So back when I was in high school, you were in middle school,
Yeah.
is when I was first introduced to you. But I was friends with your sister
Mhm.
because we're closer to the same age. And I remember you being, you were like, I don't know how to explain it, but like a little wild and everything.
The dark lipstick.
Yeah, there was a joke that she wore this really dark
The
lipstick.
color of death.
The
That's what it
yeah,
was so dark.
it was literally like almost black, like it was so
Yeah.
dark, and she would wear it all the time. But I was actually looking at pictures that I had on my Instagram, and there was one of you during that time,
Oh wow.
and I was like, wow, like if you just looked at the person who she was then and the person she is now, it's a totally different person because you look so different. Like even how you carried yourself and stuff, but like even what was radiating off of you was totally different. But I just want you to tell your story of like what's your testimony before you had that life changing encounter with God.
Okay. So I grew up in the church. We've always had Christian values in our family. But when I got to middle school, that's where I started like trying to like find my own way, I guess you would say it. And most of that included like looking for my purpose and identity in boys. So before middle school, I was like so innocent. Like if you asked me what a boyfriend was, I probably would be like, what? Like I literally had no idea. I had no desire to like be in a relationship. I had no desire to like have feelings for someone because I literally didn't know what it was. And I get to middle school, and the way it was exposed to me was the way the world presents it, and I immediately fell for it. Um, and I just started like desiring all of these things that I would never have gotten through a middle school relationship. Um, I started dating, and the guy had asked me to like do some sexual things, and I had no idea what that even meant, and I just immediately was like, I'm not doing that. They
Mhm.
broke up with me because of it. So then I had this desire, like, well, maybe I need to do those things to keep a boyfriend around, and maybe I need to do those things to feel worthy. So it was just this consecutive pattern of like jumping from guy to guy, and I wasn't like intentionally knowing what I was doing, but I was just like seeking for myself and like all of these guys. And when one relationship ended, I just went to the next one. And people to this day like would probably still joke that there was this term. It was called like a homie hopper, and
Mhm.
I was called that because I had jumped to so many guys who were all friends and they were all from the same school.
Mhm.
Um, then I got into, I think it was like the summer of eighth grade, ninth grade ish. I had like my real like first like boyfriend, like the first guy who was allowed to like come to the house and actually hang out. So it was a little bit safer because I wasn't sneaking out anymore. I wasn't like trying to meet up with guys at like 3 in the morning and stuff. But it was not healthy of a relationship. And I like completely lost myself in that. I started developing social anxiety. I started developing depression, a lot of different things, a lot of baggage that came along with that relationship. Um, and that was the first time I had encountered like those sexual things, like for the in the whole capacity of it, like premarital sex and doing like all of the things with him that are meant for a covenant in marriage.
Mhm.
And majority of it was like an emotional manipulation into it. So afterwards, I would cry and I would feel horrible, and I was comforted. And then the next day we saw each other, it was like the same thing. And I just went through these cycles of like crying and feeling horrible and not wanting to do it anymore and then doing it again. And so when that relationship ended, I was so lost because I had just crossed every line that I never wanted to cross. I had just went past everything that I had told myself I was never going to do for someone who didn't even stick around. And then after that, I just like cycled into dating people and just going from guy to guy all over again. In that time, I had got with someone and like, so, like quote unquote like cheated on them in that time frame. Jumped to the next guy, and I absolutely hated it. But the part that like actually stopped me in my tracks and made me realize like what am I doing was I dated someone um, sometime in high school, and well, I actually never really dated them. That was the thing. Like we never officially dated. I would never loved him, but I ended up sleeping with him. And the next day, he had texted me. He was like, "You might as well go ahead and block me." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Because I only used you for your body." And I just remember, like, in that moment, everything just stopped. And I was like, what am I doing? Because before I was able to reason it away, like, oh, but I'm doing these sexual things because I love them, because I'm going to marry them, because I'm going to have a future with them. But this was the first time where I couldn't reason it away. I didn't love the guy. I wasn't going to marry him. We weren't dating, but I still crossed those lines. And I just like fell on my knees and I was just crying out to God. And I'm like, God, I don't know where I am right now. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't like it. I don't want to do this anymore. And that was like the first shift back on the right path with him. In that time was when that teacher noticed like all of that weight and that baggage I was carrying and started also directing me towards God. And I took it upon myself in those months to learn about biblical love and what godly love looks like and how to live in a way that honors God, and that it was possible to have a relationship that didn't cross lines and that honored God and brought you closer to God and worked towards marriage. Um, so that was the first time in my life where I stopped seeking my identity in men, and I started like finding it in Christ and like growing in the spirit.
That's awesome. I love how you went through every stage. Like you didn't sugarcoat any of it. Like you went through every stage and how you got to where you got to, and then how you found God in that. Um, because I remember there was a time that Um, I didn't really like see you or anything, like not even on social media and stuff. And I moved to Raleigh and I moved back.
Mhm.
And when I moved back, you made this whole post about your testimony,
Mhm.
and I was like, wait a minute, this is not the same girl I know, because you were just talking about how like you found God and um you found your identity in Christ, and I was like, this is a this is a totally different Rachel than I know. And I messaged you and I was like, let's have coffee,
I
because
remember.
I wanted to see where you were. Like, I
Mhm.
wanted to know this Rachel um that has changed so much in the past like few years that I didn't see you. And we had a great conversation that day. But going from that, I want to you to tell us the process of surrendering your life, but like what had to change for you to be able to surrender your life?
So, I would say the biggest thing that I had to change was my control. I had like extreme anxiety. I was in counseling for it, and I it blew my mind because I'm in a session one day and she hadn't yet like diagnosed me. So I'm just going to these counseling sessions and I'm just like pouring my heart out, and I'm like, I want to know what's wrong with me. I want to know what's wrong with me. Why am I having anxiety? And she looks at me and she's like, you don't have an anxiety problem. You have a control problem. And that just broke me. I was like, no, I don't. Like, I'm fine. I don't control anything. But that stuck in my head, and like I started seeing that, and I'm like praying, like, God, show me, reveal to me how I have this control problem. And he did, and it hurt me. Like, it was hard, but I saw how every single thing in my life I was micromanaging. Every single thing in my life I was grasping so tightly onto, and like constructing this perfect way I wish it would go, and when it didn't, it was like immediate anxiety, and like flood into every part of my life. Like, even going to a grocery store, I was having like internal like panic attacks. Going to church, I sat in the very back row for so many months. I would like calculate every step. Like, okay, when I walk in, I'm gonna sit in this row. I'm gonna talk to these people. If they're not there, I'm gonna get on my phone and distract myself, make myself look busy. Like, these thoughts are going through my head before I get there, while I'm there, and the minute I leave, I'm right out the door. So no one can talk to me. So I can't feel lonely. So I can't feel like I'm isolated. So I just ran. And that was my struggle for a while. Even in relationships, that was my struggle. And one of the reasons I like clung so hard to find my identity in those guys was because like deep down I had this control issue. So when it came to surrender, like, control and surrender can't coexist. You
Hmm.
have to lay down your control. You have to lay down the way you think you want life to go, the way you think it should be, the way you think God should open certain doors for you. It has to leave. And it was hard to learn that. And it took a lot of situations where I had to see it for myself, and I was very stubborn to that truth, and I would like lose friends, and I would lose people I loved, and I would go through so much hurt because I was like struggling to grasp onto that concept, like, I cannot be in control of these things anymore. And that's where my surrender started, was laying down control. And now it's just like a constant everyday choice to lay down my own understanding, to lay down what I think I should say, even in ministry, like how I think I should pray for someone, how I think I should lead someone, to lay it all down and constantly be like, God, I surrender to your spirit. Like, move on me the way you want me to go about this situation, to respond to this person, to text this person back. And it's like a daily choice.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So from that, um, I want you to talk about, because in a lot of your posts, you will use the word godly relationship,
Mm-hmm.
having a godly centered relationship. Speak on that, and what does that mean to have that relationship?
Yeah, so I had noticed this pattern in every guy I was ever with, and there was just so many fights. And that's a huge struggle in relationships. I mean, like, anywhere you look, like petty arguments, just showing anger back to each other, lashing out. If they do this, you say this back. And I was so tired of that cycle, like constantly bickering and arguing, and like just getting so worked up over like the smallest of things. And I'm like, there has to be something else. Like, there has to be a relationship where this doesn't exist. And there is. And that's and that's in God's love. And so when you go to the Bible, there's that verse that you literally grow up on. Like everyone knows love is patient, love is kind. Everyone knows that verse. I mean, I knew that verse since I grew up. It was on a plate, like sitting in my house.
Mm-hmm.
But I never once applied that. Like, if you want a relationship that lasts, it has to be founded on biblical truth, and it has to be founded the way that God has designed it. And God designed it with a very specific purpose. It's between, like, a marriage is between a man and a woman. A marriage is, it's built on biblical principles like kindness. It's built on biblical principles like surrender and sacrifice and selflessness. And I started learning those things and just like deeply studying it. And I'm talking like going through the Bible, trying to find the three different definitions of love and where it's used. And I'm like
Yeah.
breaking it all down, and I'm like writing out examples. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a situation where God showed love here and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like putting this whole thing together. And I'm like, wow, like I want a relationship that looks like this. I don't want to just be in a relationship that's so casual and has all of these things wrong with it. There's all this bickering and fighting and pride. That's a killer. Pride is a killer of a relationship. I want a relationship that is striving towards this model that God has laid out. I'm like, why wouldn't I want the way God designed it? Like, if God is love, I want His love in my life. So I started pursuing that, and I started in myself just trying to lay down my flesh, like trying to lay down, like, we're arguing and I want to say this so bad, but I'm not, because I'm going to choose selflessness. And I started seeing a difference, like, even just in the other person at the time. Like, it was, everything felt so different. And I immediately knew, like, this is how love is supposed to look. It's not supposed to look this corrupted way where there's all of these things you bring to the table, and there's so much baggage, and there's so much fighting, and there's like emotional manipulation, and there's pride. It's not supposed to look that way. It's supposed to imitate God.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed like everything about the way I love my friends, about the way that I love my now fiance. Like it completely switched my view. When someone hurts me, I no longer want to block them. Like I want
Mm-hmm.
to have restoration with that person.
That's awesome. I think that's a really good example of what um you should be looking in a relationship. It's so different than what the world
Mm-hmm.
tells you about what a relationship should look like. And so what I like is that you mentioned that you have a fiance now, and I want to get into like what does that relationship look? How did that relationship look different than your past relationships? Like um how did you get to that point?
So when it comes to pursuing biblical love, you can't do it one sided. Like you both have to intentionally be pursuing biblical love, and not making room for the enemy to come in and put in your mind lust for someone else, and put in your mind pride and arrogance and all of those selfish things that are like by default we want to do those things. And the biggest difference, because I'm sure a lot of people knew about the relationship before this one, where like that was almost one that ended in marriage as well. Um, but the biggest difference now is that we're I'm with someone who we're both pursuing God's design for marriage. It's not this one-sided battle where like I'm carrying the weight of two people. It's equally yoked. And when you're in a relationship where you're equally yoked, it completely changes the atmosphere of that relationship. Um, and I actually believe it, like, it really mimics God's love for us. And loving my fiance now, it's every day it's like I feel closer to God, because I'm not just loving what he thinks love is. I'm not just in this blind relationship where we're just going through our feelings for the day, and if you're mad, oh okay, I'm mad too. It's like we're laying our life down for each other. We're laying down how we feel for each other to honor God. And when you're in that type of atmosphere, it's like you can't help but feel God's presence. Um, and I think that, I mean, that's the biggest difference, is laying your life down for each other because you're surrendered to his spirit, and what he calls love, not what the world says love is. And all these problems in your relationship is failing and it's not fruitful, but you love each other, so you should stay together. You should work on it. Like, it's
Mhm.
different.
That's awesome. I love something about like watching y'all relationship on social media is y'all do a lot together. Like it's not just a relationship. Y'all have a business together, Kingdom Shakers, where y'all do photography and sometimes like you do graphic design and um videoing. But then you also do ministry together. Like y'all both are yeah, very involved in Rise Youth,
Hmm.
and that is just awesome. Like y'all do so many things together, but it's still like um biblically centered, like Christ centered relationship. Um, so going from relationships, I want to go talk about like in the season you're walking in right now. What is something new you've learned about God?
Something new. Mm. I think like the season I'm in like right now has been more about obedience than anything else. Like I'm like you said, I'm like involved in ministry, and there's times where I have feelings about certain things, and
Mm,
it's like right now I'm learning that has nothing to do with my feelings. It has nothing to do with like what I think or how I would proceed. It has everything to do with like literally disobeying God. Another aspect of that is like I do social media ministry as well, and there's like constantly times where God like pops something on my spirit, and I'm like so strong about it. I'm like, I have to make a video about that. I have to write that down. I have to post it, and I don't do anything with it.
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow. And then the next day, it is gone. Like I had forgot about it. Um, and it's just that simple practice of like being obedient to the spirit. Like when God says do something, do it. Um, and it's teaching me more about like His covering and His goodness, and like when He directs you somewhere, follow it and follow it wholeheartedly. Not when your feelings come in, like oh then you can stop following how what He says. No, it's like you do it all the way through, no matter what.
That's amazing. Talking about like obedience in the sense of sometimes you have this strong feeling about something God's wanting you to do.
Mm-hmm.
I like how you said that you do social media ministry, so you're posting and talking about Christ, and um you talk about your relationship with Him and all that stuff. But He will give you things that He wants you to talk about, and I can relate to that because there's times like I'll be having um this feeling like God's wanting me to say something or write something,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's like I don't really want to do that. Like I don't really know if like I'm supposed to, if this is just a me thing
Yeah, like oh, it's
or
just my thought. It's not from the spirit.
right. But I tend to know like for me, if it's that same thought that's like for multiple days and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing, that's all I can think about, then I'm like I need to go ahead and take the time and post it.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes it's like out of your comfort zone. Like you don't really want to do it
Yeah.
because for me, it's like I don't know like how people are going to
And respond to it or take
right.
it. Yeah,
So,
on Sunday, our pastor was speaking literally about this, and I was like, man, I was just thinking about this yesterday. And he was like, every time God puts it on his heart to go pray for someone, and he hesitates, in the matter of a minute, someone else goes and prays for that person. And I was like, it's funny because every time I've wanted to like post about this specific thing, if I hesitate, the next day, someone I know or I see a post and it's that. And I'm like, how? Like it's because
hmm
the lack of obedience, like God's gonna send someone to fill that hole.
right.
And I've been learning that a lot lately.
That's awesome. Like that, it's not just a you thing. Like there's a lot of people who are like battling with that, and but it's encouraging to also know that you're not alone in
Right.
that. Going from that, I would like you to give some advice to someone who may be struggling to surrender every aspect of their life to God.
It's like this overwhelming thing, I feel like, at first, when you think about like surrendering everything, because then you don't get to cuss anymore. You don't get to like
Mhm.
you don't get to do all these things that you think are a part of who you are. Like, oh, I can't listen to this kind of music. I can't watch certain things.
Mhm.
But it doesn't start off that way. It's not like it's just this rule book where it's like, okay, you surrendered. Now you can't do A, B, C, D, E, F. Don't forget about G. Like,
Right.
it doesn't start off that way. Like when I surrendered, it wasn't like I had all of these things, like this list, and I had to like immediately know what to do. It was like the a small step. Okay, I'm gonna surrender my feelings in this situation. And then it was another thing. Okay, I'm not gonna listen to this kind of music anymore because that doesn't glorify God. And then it was the next thing, and it's like it was brought onto me as much as I could handle on my plate, like at a time. And I'm just like going through, and I mean, now I look at myself and I'm like, wow, like I've surrendered so much that I would never want back. Like certain things
Mhm.
I used to watch and do, like I would never take that back. But there's still so many other things that I need to surrender. So
Right.
it's like this daily walk of sanctification. And if I was to encourage someone, like why would you want that? Why would you choose to lay down things that you like and you enjoy doing? And what I would say to them is like when I was doing what I wanted and when I was watching all these things and listening to all these things, I struggled with anxiety bad. Like that stuff amplified everything I was feeling internally. Like depression, that was worse. Like
Mhm.
my insecurity, 10 times worse. My overthinking, my intrusive thoughts, like a million times worse. And when I started surrendering, I started seeing God show up in areas that I didn't think had anything to do with each other. Like I'm surrendering my feelings in this fight and now all of a sudden I'm not feeling anxious when I go into a store.
Right.
And it was all connected. Like your surrender has everything to do with the way you live your life. It has everything to do with how you're feeling on a daily basis because as you learn to surrender, you're learning to like yield yourself to the spirit and not walk by how you feel every day. And that is the biggest blessing to me. Like if I was to convince someone to follow God, that's probably what I would use. Like you don't have to be on a leash and like being pulled around by your feelings. It was like draining every day to feel something and then carry that through my entire week. Like to actually live my life like dragged around by
Mhm.
anger that week or dragged around by anxiety and like crippling anxiety at
Right.
that. And there's freedom in surrender. There's so much freedom when you obey God and you do it the way that like he has designed it. And when you contradict that, when you go against the way that he's designed something, you'll feel the weight of it in other areas. And it's like, why would you not want to lay that down? Why would you not want to be like going towards his will, going towards the identity he has for you? I mean, like that in itself for me, if someone told me that 10 years ago, I don't think I would have went through that season where I was chasing all those boys.
Mhm. I love how people usually think like Christians are so like boring.
Yeah.
They're stuck to rules, and I do believe like some people are like that. Like they believe like that's what you're supposed to do, but
Mm-hmm.
um that's like not what God really wants. He's not restraining you to do a little part of life. You can have fun.
Right.
You can
I have so much fun, but I'm not, and not in a way that
right.
like dishonors God, but
Right.
it's like you can do both without doing drugs, without
Right.
smoking, without having premarital sex. Like you can still have so much fun in life, like, and your life would be more abundant because it's not something that's gonna pass by and you need it again. Like it's not a fix.
Mhm.
It's you're actually sustained.
Right. And I've also feel like now in the time we're in, we have so many like resources that are um like so many good Christian movies or
Yes,
like
and Christian
music.
comedy pages.
Right. Or
That's
like
so.
even the music is like so much better than it was like
Yeah,
5 to 10 years
there's
ago.
Christian rap now. Like
Yeah.
that.
Which your fiance
Oh
does.
yeah, he does.
So like it's like but it's like so awesome like that you're not restrained to just a certain thing. Like
Right.
you just need to find like the things that honor God.
Mhm.
Um, that's really all I have. I am so blessed to have you on. Before we go, I want to tell everybody like how old you are because
I thought you
no, I
forgot.
was waiting to the end. But she's only 18 years old and she has spoke so much wisdom. There's so many truth in what she has said that is really like impactful. There's people who are in their 50s who don't have some of the wisdom you have. So I am so proud of you. I'm so blessed to be your friend and have you on. So I just want to say thank you.
You're gonna make me cry. But thank you for allowing me to do this.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Jesus the Overcomer podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share it to your friends. See you next time.